I hope I'm talking to farmers because I'm a farmer. I grew up on my family's dairy farm. I now farm 200 acres of grapes here in Napa. Farmers think differently about their land. Many farmers find themselves in a position of wanting to keep the farm in a family farming type situation. But like most of you, so much of the value of what I've been working for all these years is tied up in the value of my land.
I moved here in 1974, and in 81 we started Frog Sleep Winery, John Williams and I. We grew a small amount of Sauvignon Blanc here. In 93, John went on to take Frog Sleep down to Rutherford, and I began going into debt to the bank to purchase vineyards. I started doing conservation easements on the property here in Napa Valley. The conservation easement was very advantageous in helping me purchase vineyards.
When I was a kid, we'd drive through the Santa Clara Valley, and it was a great agricultural area, full of cherries, great cherries, apricots, grapes, you name it. It was ideal climate, ideal soil. And when I went to college, I saw the bulldozers coming, and they were leveling all the cherry trees. I was trying to steal as many as I could before they leveled them, and building houses. At a young age, I vowed to myself to not be a part of that. We bought our first vineyard 10 years after I started the winery. Shortly thereafter, I put it in the Napa County Land Trust. To me, it's the right thing to do.
This is the historic Henry Ranch. This is a very unique ranch. We're in the Caneros Appellation. If you go to the top of the hill, we get up to 500, 600 feet in elevation. We're in the Mount Veeder Appellation. We have so many different varieties here. So that's all Pinot down there, and Chardonnay, a little bit of Merlot. As we get up top, that's where we have a Cabernet. And where we were at the barns down there, that's Sauvignon Blanc. For us, it's really important that we protect this beauty. You know, this is something that just can't be duplicated. The Napa Valley is protected under this blanket of the Ag Preserve. Nearly 60 years ago, this first of its kind ag zoning said ag is the highest and best use. But I think we need to go a step further.
The Ag Preserve was the citizens' idea, their first attempt to say, man, we want to protect agriculture in Napa County. It's very important to us that this stay rural. We don't want to see houses taken over. We don't want to see the entire valley overrun like some of our neighboring counties where there's subdivisions and suburbs built on top of each other. But the thing with zoning is it's impermanent. Zoning can change based on who is leading at our Board of Supervisors. It could change by a citizens initiative. There's a lot of different ways that the zoning could be affected. What the conservation easements do is they then take that same idea and they make it permanent. We don't want to see agricultural soils essentially planted to asphalt. That defeats the purpose of maintaining cultivated agriculture, having that option available. So conservation easements over vineyard lands here in Napa really create that permanent protection where zoning may or may not for a certain amount of time, but the easements are permanent.
I think one of the very first conservation easements we did was here at this ranch, because we knew that something like this, it wasn't enough just to say, we're not going to develop it. But once you put it in a conservation easement, it's forever. It's in perpetuity. And I think, you know, there's some economic incentives to do that, and certainly getting a tax benefit is important.
We decided to use conservation easements as a way of ensuring that the agricultural investments that our family was making would be secure. Conservation easement has the additional benefit of ensuring that the property, if it were to go out of the family hands, continued to be in agriculture. So if that's an important family and philosophical objective, it also means that the property is going to trade at agricultural values, not at housing or commercial development values. So you do have, if you will, the societal benefit of making agricultural land available to future farmers at agricultural prices as opposed to development prices.
It's important to remember that when you enter into an agreement with the Ag Trust, certainly here in Napa, but I think in general, that's a permanent deed restriction on your property. So it is a commitment not only for yourself, but your next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. So this isn't a decision you take lightly, but if it is part of your core values, it's one that's pretty easy, or at least was for us to make. I don't want this to sound like this was all altruistic. I mean, this was also an important business decision for us. This generated a very large tax deduction, and that benefited us, particularly as we were in a growing situation where the winery, to have that cash returned to the business allowed us to make improvements, get these vineyards replanted, and things that were very, very important to us as a business.
Say you're an older, like me, grape grower that you don't want to sell, so you get money by a tax break if you donate it, and if you really also want to preserve it for your children, your grandchildren, it's really an ideal way to do that. You have money for your life and you preserve the land for your children, so they are able to afford it.
By and large, we do not purchase conservation easements over cultivated agricultural land. The price per acre is extremely cost prohibitive. And so all of our vineyard conservation easements have been done through donations. The timing is really driven by the landowner's tax consequences.
Once you make a decision to put your farm into an easement, no one tells you how to farm, no one tells you what you can do unless it's been specifically restricted. About once a year, they come out and check to make sure that you haven't double the size of your house or built some new buildings, but really it's a pretty perfunctory sort of thing. And I think that's important for farmers to know. We don't need someone coming out and telling us how to do this or how to do that. We just are in the process of digging a new well. We did not have to check with them. That's an agricultural use of the land. And so it's important to know that this isn't telling you how to farm. This is telling you you have to farm.
It's in perpetuity, so you need to decide and vocalize exactly what you want to do in the future with the land. So if you have vineyards, you can preserve that part. If there's forest, you preserve that part. If you want to develop an area, you need to establish that early because you cannot go back. But it's quite wide-reaching, and I found it very flexible to work with. I asked in the Angwin property to be able to skeet shoot and to build a tall stone observation tower. And both of those are written into our contract. So think far, far ahead over several generations and you'll do fine.
We've been very firm in making clear that specific definitions of structures or wells or fencing or corrals, all of those sorts of decisions were not subject to any constraint or review by the land trust. Farming practice very well may change. And the location of what the way you want to site things on your land very well may change.
It's really hard being a farmer. I don't have to tell a farmer that. This is a tough business. Make sure that if you do want to preserve some things, that you can still continue to run your business.
One additional experience with regard to placing conservation easements is that once you get an area started under a conservation easement, it can often be very encouraging to adjacent neighbors. So in our case, where we took the very first initiative to seek conservation easements on our property in the Napa Valley, I was able ultimately to engage three of our neighbors who were actually much larger landholders than we. And we ended up creating a 2,400 acre contiguous conservation conserved area under conservation easement. And in every case, it resulted in substantial economic benefit and perpetuation of those land holdings.
I think the inspiring part for me about doing the conservation easements is maybe the result. So that when I drive up and down Napa Valley, I can look to the left and I see John Williams' property. And then I look to the right and I see something that Dario Satui has protected. And then I drive a little further north and I look to the right and I see something that was protected by Larry and Suzanne Turley. So it's kind of cool to be able to look and see that impact.
We've seen what has happened to many parts of our state. I think it's just incumbent upon all of us that have the privilege of being caretakers of these lands that we do something about it. Because if we're not going to do something about it, who will?
The night we signed the papers to permanently preserve this property was the best sleep I've had in years. And so I really think this is something people should look into.
If your philosophical and family objective is to perpetuate agriculture, and ensure that the property, whether it's in your family's hands or in a future family's hands, is going to be in agriculture. This is one of the very few, maybe the only mechanism to actually ensure that that occurs.
Agriculture is the way that we're going to protect the land. If we're not successful and sustainable with agriculture, everything that we have, all this open space, is at risk. And so it's so important that we have ability to farm sustainably, successfully, and in doing so, we can help preserve this beautiful asset we have here in the Napa Valley.
Oregon is beautiful, especially the Willamette Valley. And why wouldn't you do that? And you get a tax deduction.
The advice I'd give to any other winemaker is just do it. It's a great concept, and it's not that difficult, and it's very rewarding.